Wonderful. This is Anna Whites, and thank you all for joining the Kentucky Democratic Auxiliary for our Candidate 101 training on campaign staff. Do I need them? Where do I find them? What are they? This recording is to be shared widely. Please share it with your friends, anyone interested in being a candidate or campaign staff. And I am an attorney in Frankfort, Kentucky. I've been working in politics and election law for pretty much as long as I've been an attorney, so more than 30 years. We'll leave it at that. And I act as a resource for many of our Democratic elected officials, many candidates at every level, a bunch of PACs, some labor organizations. So I get to play all over the Democratic field and love it. And hope that what we share with you today is going to be helpful and make this a little easier for you. And with me is my co-host, Terrell Renfro. Terrell, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for having me today. Been involved with campaigns now and government for about 20 years. I started as a campaign volunteer in 2003 when Ben Chandler ran for governor, and then it progressed to U.S. Senate campaigns and governor campaigns, and which got me in office for the first governor, Beshear, and primarily worked with his lieutenant governor, Daniel Mangiardo, during that time, and then moved on to Secretary of State campaign, worked for Allison Lonergan Grimes in her Secretary of State's office, Auditor Adam Elan, Treasury, I guess the Treasurer, Todd Hollenbach, and then I went to the Labor Cabinet. Now I'm with the Laborers Union, so the Kentucky Laborers District Council, and Kentucky Lesset is my role, where I'm at marketing and public relations. So I've been around and know a little bit about staffing and successful campaigns and sometimes not successful campaigns. So, but it's been a long, good 20 years so far, and I got involved as soon as I could at 18. So I'm 38, so I'm not too old there, and I wanted to, get involved as quick as I could, and I started just as a volunteer, so that helped me get into paid staff roles, and then roles there actually in government. So it's just a little bit about me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And as you can see from Terrell's bio, he's one of the many young consultants and campaign folks that we have in Kentucky who started literally in high school, a lot of them. I have a couple on my roster who started in middle school. So it's never too young to start being politically active. And as you're reaching out for campaign staff or campaign advice, don't be surprised when some of the people with the best advice are those under 40 or sometimes even under 20. So listen with an open heart, open ears to whatever we hear. All right, this is how to find and hire campaign staff. Next slide, please. What does staff do? And this is a question that even experienced candidates ask, like, what is my staff supposed to do for me? First and foremost, they are supposed to work for you. Beware if you hire somebody and they immediately say, I'm in charge, this is our mission, this is our plan, we're moving forward this way. Remember that you are the candidate and that you are not only ultimately responsible for everything that can go wrong legally or otherwise in your campaign, but you're also the person who folks are going to remember. Not a lot of us remember, even in a very, very successful campaign like Andy Beshear's recent win. Who were his campaign staff? I doubt that many of us could cite you a list of names, but we all remember Andy. So you are the face of your campaign, and you need to remember that and work with staff accordingly. That doesn't mean walking around saying, it's my campaign, I'm the boss. But it does mean really accepting that responsibility and honor that you have as the candidate moving forward. Staff teaches you the basics of their field. Even folks like me and Terrell, who've been doing this in a variety of roles for decades, don't know some of the fields and some of what goes on. I am really not a numbers person, so I cannot tell you what a treasurer or a fundraiser does very well, and I certainly couldn't do their jobs. So each field has experts and folks who are just naturally talented in that area. And so we defer to them. Your campaign staff also connects you with others. Typically, even if it's a volunteer or a young person, they've been around the political scene a while. And so they'll know people. And everyone that they can connect you with who's worked in politics in any aspect has something important to share with you. So they help build that web, that network of folks who are going to hold and support your campaign as you move forward. Also, remember, it's your campaign and your contract. So write it the way you want. When you're hiring people or enrolling people to work with you, remember that they need to carry your message and your vision forward. And if you're using written contracts, which I definitely recommend, put in there what's important to you. I tell people it really is your contract. You can put in there, I love pink. You can put in there, every campaign staff worker has to wear a pink shirt on Thursday. You can do whatever you want with your contract because you are the person responsible for the way your campaign looks and acts and operates. It's also very important when you're looking at hiring staff to hire people who uphold your ideas and uphold your beliefs. You don't want to hire folks who act in a way that's really negative or that doesn't go along with what your campaign message or mission is. That said, as we all know, we have a lot to work with, even across the aisle, but certainly people who dissent and disagree with us. The hallmarks of a very healthy organization are that people can disagree and even fight and yell and stamp their feet across a conference table, but still come to the right consensus. You also don't want to hire a bunch of folks who just say, yes, great, wonderful, yes, we'll do that, because you're not getting the best messaging and the best vision if people are just plain old saying yes to you. And Terrell, what else does staff do?
Well, make sure that the campaign's running smoothly. You know, the candidate can only do so much, and you really need to delegate to your staff. I mean, you can't respond to every social media uh, message, for instance. You can't put, everything out there yourself. It's like, hey, I've taken these pictures, for instance. Can you get them out for me? Can we formulate a message? I mean, returning calls, just anything that helps the campaign run is what staff does. And the candidate doesn't need to have those responsibilities, period. I mean, the candidate needs to have stress-free life because, it's a very stressful endeavor anyway. But the campaign, together needs to have a lot of unity. Of this person does this person does that. And the last thing you need is a candidate saying, hey, have we done this? Have we done that? And being in charge and micromanaging how the campaign's run. It just doesn't, it's not beneficial, it doesn't help.
Right. Good thinking. Good point. And we had a question about whether we had contracts available. And along with this PowerPoint and this presentation, I've done a template contract for hiring staff, paid staff, which includes a non-disclosure agreement, and which is very important. You always want to have some sort of a non-disclosure, particularly for the folks who handle your list of donors, because you don't want somebody else getting that, or who handle any confidential information, your long-term strategy or people's checks. You don't want that to be traveling around. And a contract is a good idea because in every campaign season, in every election, there's going to be 5 or 6 people whose main campaign manager or finance person or main fundraiser has gotten into conflict with the candidate, has packed up the entire PDF and hard drive of what they knew and taken it to the highest bidder. Typically, if it's a primary, to your opponent. So you really want to have that protection for yourself. I also have a template contract for volunteers because I recognize, while we want to pay staff and I really promote paying people, even if it's a pittance, pay them something. But occasionally campaigns will have volunteers in a staff position as the treasurer, as the campaign manager. And those folks also need a contract, even if you aren't paying them. So we have both kinds. Where do I find staff? And I have probably gotten 75 emails in the last week saying, how do I find a blank? And so while I'm sharing the names of folks we know, You can also work on your own to find staff. College democratic organizations, if you went to a Kentucky college or live fairly close to a Kentucky college, most of our colleges have really, really good democratic college groups. Some of the best speakers at our auxiliary trainings have been young people from college democratic organizations, their president or their vice president, who has been working for 4 years at least in politics in that region and is really savvy, really aware. It also really helps give you a more youthful perspective if you are a candidate who is not in your 20s. It's nice to have that youth to balance out some age and wisdom. Ask people who ran in your race before. I'm always surprised by how few people who file to run in a race have talked to the people who've run in the last 2 years, 4 years, 10 years. Those folks, even if it's been redistricted, those folks have a lot of information that you need, not just lists of voters, lists of precincts, where is good to ask for money, but they also know the ins and outs of this is when the parade is. This is how you get to speak at the chamber. This is when the library will let you hold a fundraising meeting in the back. So always reach out to those folks as resources and ask them who they used on their campaigns. If you have a friend with a specific or special skill, an accountant, a CPA in your family, somebody who's super organized and is always the first person in any group that you are in to have an agenda, have a menu, take notes, bring people together, that's a very useful skill to have. I do caution candidates, please think long and hard before having your significant other or a child in a campaign staff position. The worst conversations I have to have with candidates is you are being sanctioned by ethics or by the Registry of Election Finance because your spouse made a terrible financial mistake on your papers. That's never easy. It's very hard also if all campaign staff have a vision and are moving one way and the spouse has a child who's got a very strong opinion the other way, but no experience in politics. Most people are going to lean towards their child, not towards the experienced staff. So while your family, we hope, is a big part of what you are doing, they really should not be your chief campaign roles. Also, some days you're going to look at your campaign staff and think, I just hate you all. I don't want to spend one more minute with you. And you then really would have to hate to get in the car and go home with them and spend the night. So give yourself a little breathing room that way as well. The Kentucky Democratic Auxiliary is making a list of folks who are self-identifying for candidate positions. And the Bluegrass Activist Alliance is working with us to get from their giant pool of folks. So we should have a list that will go along with this training and be posted on the auxiliary site. And if you know anyone in BAA, they also will have the same list. We're sharing names. Terrell, anything I forgot about where to find staff?
I've heard folks talk about Indeed and LinkedIn as well.
That makes sense.
I know sometimes they'll put a post out there saying, we need this type of person for this role. And of course, with Indeed, Indeed is, I'm not real positive with or real familiar with Indeed. And then, of course, LinkedIn. So you can help, identify folks that way by sending resumes in.
And it is good to reach out to all those places. I'm really Kentucky centric. I think where possible, particularly on our smaller campaigns, we should hire folks in state. But so be aware if you're using LinkedIn or Indeed, you probably are also going to get some really good people from out of state. So I will frown at you, but it might help your campaign. Next slide, please. The positions vary by campaigns, but we're going to go through the basic positions that most campaigns have at least some of these folks in their staff. Next slide. Campaign treasurer. Oh, this is the most important. Your campaign treasurer does your payroll if you have paid staff, or at least is the liaison with whoever is doing payroll. They do your Kentucky Registry of Election Finance reporting or your FEC reporting if you're a federal candidate. And they keep your financial records. Everything that comes in, they should be making spreadsheets or making some financial software input, all your expenditures and all your contributions. It is very important, even if somebody gives you less than the reportable minimum, even less than $100, you need to have your campaign treasurer recording that, because that person may give you $20 today and $20 tomorrow, and before you know it, you are over the reporting limit and you haven't kept track because it was always under $100. So your treasurer needs to be somebody who's very focused on minutia and very, very detail oriented. I cannot tell you how many candidates get in trouble every year because they don't have a treasurer. They're getting handfuls of checks or, God forbid, cash, and they think they're putting it in the account timely, or they turn around and they have money in their hand and somebody said you need to pay the vendor $20 or $100 for these hats, and they hand it and the money then doesn't add up. And they're there saying, well, it shows in my notes I got $3,000 and all that we reported was $1,500. And it's very hard to go back and fix that retroactively if you're not keeping track as it comes in. A lot easier with checks or with online donations, ActBlue or Campaign Deputy or whoever you're using. But if you are just getting small bits of money, you're going to lose track really quickly. And you will really get in trouble for that. You'll be calling me before you know it. If you're lucky, your campaign treasurer will also attend fundraisers with you and sit there at the door and take people's information and checks and make sure you're getting all of the accurate information for each contributor, their name, their spouse's name, their job, their address, so that that can go into your reporting. Because every single piece of identifying information has to go into each campaign report. And if you're trying to recreate that at the last minute, that is an awful lot of legwork for somebody. Your treasurer also helps you stay on track, work with budgets, think about how much you have in contributions and what you're going to need to spend and when. Because if you know there's a big media buy coming up or you've got an order for hats coming up, your treasurer can say, well, you only have $100 in the account. Let's be hitting that call time. Next slide. Campaign treasurer tips. Good places to find campaign treasurers are accounting students. If you go to a graduate or college program, often there'll be an accounting student who may be not political at all, but is very good with numbers and would like to learn how to do political reporting, because a number of CPA firms have actual hired positions that are their campaign CPAs. So having that expertise is very helpful for their resume. If you have a church or a community organization in your neck of the woods or that you belong to, often the treasurers for those organizations are very good at reporting and at keeping track, particularly if you're using something like a community, like a ball team for your kids or something like that. They're used to tiny bits of money coming in very fast and having to keep track of it all. Again, former candidates, often these make great treasurers. They know the mistakes, they probably made the few, and they're really going to help you stay on the straight and narrow. Higher expertise and organization in this field. You don't, for just the treasurer piece, you don't have to have somebody who has done a lot in the political space. They have to know numbers and be organized and be capable of using the KREF or FEC reports, which are pretty easy to do the input. It's mostly just data entry. They don't have to be super attuned to political nuances. If you're using a treasurer who's also going to be your fundraiser person, then you probably do need somebody with more political expertise, because they're going to have to know how to join those two roles. The gregarious, outgoing, mix and mingle treasurer, fundraiser / position is very different from somebody who's just doing data entry. So think about what you're hiring and whether that needs to be one or two folks. And Terrell, what do you see from your side?
I do think that you have to have somebody with a little bit of experience. It depends on how big the race is, naturally, and how many contributions you expect. I've heard numbers of, 500 a month maybe, or something similar to get a good treasurer. particularly if they have experience. Um, it just helps when you have somebody who knows when a lot of contributions come in. But if it's a smaller race, then find somebody who at least can be helpful to you without having to spend any money. But if it's a bigger race, definitely consider hiring somebody a little bit or just a little stipend.
That's a good point. And the treasurer position is the one that can get you in the most trouble. If they make a mistake, your treasurer is also registered with the FEC or KREF, and you'll both be sued or investigated by KREF if you make a mistake. And the minimum fine for making a mistake, a late filing, an omitted expenditure, you lost some money somewhere in there, the minimum fine has now gone up to $500. So if you think about that, it really is worth paying a little bit of money to make sure you're not going to end up paying that fine later. Next slide, please. Campaign manager. Oh, this is the most visible person on the campaign. In smaller races, sometimes they volunteer their expertise and effort, but on a larger race, this is probably your high dollar expenditure if you're getting somebody who's done this a lot and has a real wealth of experience and knowledge. This person coordinates the various campaign operations, polling, advertising, financial, brings everything together, helps you with the messaging, helps you decide not just where you're going in terms of physically, where are we going to go, where are we going to walk neighborhoods, what fundraisers are we going to, but also where you're going in terms of messaging and timeline. I really do not recommend a campaign manager who has never done this before. You really need somebody who's going to know all the acronyms. Every field has its acronyms, who's going to be able to pick up the phone and call legal and technical and financial expertise without having to search. Somebody who really knows who gives big money in this race and who gives big money in the state and out of the state. Someone who knows enough about it that if you are making a new candidate mistake, is going to be able to say, that is a mistake and here's why. And so this is not the first position you should hire maybe, but it's definitely the most important position you'll hire. The campaign manager plans and executes the entire campaign plan. And your campaign manager, when you hire them, should sit down with you, and that plan should not be through the primary. That plan should be through the general. You need to be thinking about the end goal when you start your race. So you need somebody who is capable of getting there with you and in some cases pulling you across that finish line. And Terrell?
Well, it's a big role, a really big role, and it's really important. And of course, it depends on what kind of race, what type of race you're involved with. But if you're running for a state race, for instance, you really need somebody who has the experience running campaigns. Check their track record as well. You're going to spend a little bit sometimes, and just look how much somebody will charge you as well. Could be from 1,000, could be 2,000 a month. But if you get a good one, you really the money right there shouldn't matter too much because it will help you just tremendously. And you sometimes get a first time person who could be just fantastic. But it just, if it's a big race, I would certainly get somebody with experience. If it's commissioner race or magistrate race, somebody who's just kind of been involved in campaigns, you might choose that person, and pay them a little bit. But it's a big race. I'd definitely shop around. There are lots of good folks out there, and it'll help you a huge bit if you're in that type of race because you got to have somebody with experience. There's no doubt.
Right. And if you do have somebody new to the job, make sure they know folks who've done it before. If they say, I've never done this before, but I've worked on a campaign with so-and-so as a campaign manager, and that person is on our list, or folks know that they're good, great. They have a mentor. They'll be able to do it. And also remember, this is not a marriage. You are not stuck with this person. So make your best bet, hire that person and hope that it works out. but don't ever be tied to that person so that you feel like you can't get away. If they don't work with you, if you two do not share a vision, um, this is staff. Go ahead and execute that contract, fire them in a friendly manner, and move along and get someone else. Next slide. Campaign manager tips, someone you can spend time with. If this is not somebody that you would go on a road trip with, please do not hire them. Even if they are your remote campaign manager, rather than being on site and traveling around with you, you are going to spend more time with this person than you do with your dog. You're going to be with them constantly, at least in your head, if not physically. And so it has to be somebody you can stand. Um, the person should be aligned with your beliefs. You should find a campaign manager who, if they don't agree with you on your major issues, at least can see why you hold your opinion and can advocate for your opinion. Don't buy into needing someone that KDP or the caucus or a prior candidate says, oh, you have to have XYZ. It's really a personal decision. I know I said it's not a marriage, but it is that personal. You're going to spend so much time with this person. And so it has to be somebody that you feel comfortable with and you like, not somebody that somebody else told you, oh, you should hire Bob. And don't pay for someone who isn't working for you. If they turn out to be a remote campaign manager who's really not sitting in meetings and giving you ideas, or if they sit around in the office and have coffee and schmooze and you don't like that, end the relationship. Move on to the next person. Don't pay people who are not furthering your campaign. Every cent you pay needs to move that campaign further down the road. Next slide. Fundraising finance director. This is the person who has what I think would be the fun job. You get to decide where we go have parties and meet people. So they do find where you should hold fundraising parties in your area. They do talk about fundraisers. If you're going to a small town for a parade or a meet and greet, they'll reach out and find somebody in that region who has a nice house or money or good friends and hold a fundraiser at that person's house. They also do the way less fun, but more important, call time with you. Some of these folks will sit down and create a call time script with you, lists of people you need to call, look at your list, line them both up. In many cases, I've made these folks sit in the car or in the office with the candidate for hours at a time, making sure that candidate is accountable for call time. Your call time person will say, okay, now we're calling Sue. You have 3 minutes. Go. It's also very important, if you're not used to doing call time, to have somebody there to say, oh my gosh, you've been on the phone for 5 minutes with this person and you still haven't said, will you give me $1,000? So they really help hold you accountable and keep you on track. If you're like me, you'll get on a phone call 20 minutes later, you will have forgotten that you're supposed to ask them for money. And with call time, you don't have that luxury. You should be every 5 minutes, another person, another dollar. And the fundraising person helps hold you to that. They can also teach your volunteers how to make calls, whether those are calls for money or calls for volunteers or calls for spaces to hold meetings or even just calls to tell people about you. But this person knows your message, knows the fun spin to put on it, and can teach all of your volunteers how to do it. They create and execute fundraisers. Often they'll work with your media person to make the invites, plan the menu, or make sure somebody is bringing food and drink to the fundraiser. They do anything that is from party planning to call time voter lists. Terrell, what did I miss on that one?
Well, you added everything that really needs to be talked about, but this person's going to be the bad guy or bad gal to you a lot. And, you got to have somebody who's willing to stand up to you. I've seen some really good folks. I've seen some really bad folks. And the ones who haven't been so successful, they don't stand up and they don't make the candidate work, and they're not organized. Organization, you got to find somebody really organized to be in this role, because this is the only way your campaign gets going. And, you can have a friend, but make sure, if it's your friend, you don't mind them telling you, what to do. You've got to have somebody who's willing to push you, because you have to make those calls. I don't have much experience with fundraising. I wish I had over the years, but I've seen, folks trained by, there's a guy named Scott Gell who used to do many campaigns. He's done all the Governor Bashir's plural campaigns and, things in between there. But there's a system, and you really got to have somebody who can organize that system for you, because I mean, your make or break deal with your fundraising.
Yep. And that's something that a lot of first time candidates don't realize. You know, you're going to be walking. You're going to go through a lot of pairs of sneakers. You know, you'll be dressing up and speaking at a lot of events, but a lot of candidates don't go into it thinking, I am going to be spending 2 or 3 hours on the phone every day, asking people for money, which is the least fun thing you can do on the phone. Um, and that's a real reality, particularly for legislative or out race. You're just going to be asking people for money hours a day. It is a job, and you need somebody who will keep your spirits up, but also make you do it when your spirits are down. So think very, very carefully about who you want in this position. Next slide. It should be a creative person, because they're also going to decide things that make you different from other candidates. What makes your fundraiser fun and somebody else's deadly boring with limp vegetables and warm Kool-Aid. But they also need to be somebody brave enough to boss you around. Former sales folks are great assets. The best call time script trainer I know is Mike Van Winkle, because he sold cars and vacuum cleaners, and by golly, selling a candidate is a lot easier than either of those. And he really, really is a stickler about holding his candidates to tracking that call time script and making that ask early and often. And the most surprising thing that he taught our folks about in the county party trainings was 5 or 10% return on your calls is a really good return. People guess much higher than that. But if you're getting 10% of the people you call giving you money, you are killing it. And I didn't realize that. So having someone with expertise helps, because they know what is a good call and what is a bad call, and the rest of us might not. Next slide. Field director. This is the one I really don't get involved with very much. You run into very few legal issues with your field, unless you've hired some wacky firm from out of state, as people have in the past, and they help themselves to folks' lawn gnomes or dress inappropriately as they're going door to door. But typically, field is not legally troublesome. Your field director coordinates all the direct voter contact, including knocking on voter doors, phone banks, sometimes even hosting house parties or meetings with the candidate that aren't fundraiser driven, the informational ones rather than the, hey, give me money ones. And this person really has to be organized, really has to be good with people, because they're going to be managing your teams of volunteers and family members and you as you decide whose door do we knock on, who do we call, where do we go. They really have to have a deep understanding or an ability to understand maps and work closely with our mapping experts so that they know where there are Democrats who are folks you should touch and folks who are Democrats but may not vote unless you go see them. This person is your make it or break it in terms of getting the votes into the polls. They look at the turf, they look at the voter access, and they tell you what to do. And to me, it looks like wizardry, but they're vital. And Terrell, you've probably done more of this than I have.
Oh, sure. This is what a lot of the campaigns I've worked with. This has been some really been on the ground doing it in the trenches. I mean, this is key to getting your message out. And you've got to have somebody who knows how to work the system. When I say system, like the voter file, and identifying, who you do need to talk to, because it is a waste of your time if you are going after folks, like I was saying, that they might be a registered Democrat, but they haven't voted Democrat forever, and they won't, even though they're registered. But this is huge. I mean, this if you don't have the money, you have to be on the ground, making the calls, knocking doors, being in front of everybody, getting this message out for you. Because a lot of times you may not have money to be on TV, to spend for digital purposes or whatnot. But if you can go door to door and wear out your shoes, lose some weight. I heard somebody lost about 30 pounds here recently, knocking on doors a lot. So you have to have somebody who knows the game uh, to help you, because this really is important, really important. And the systems are not easy; they're kind of challenging. If you look at the voter file and cutting the turf and focusing on where you need to go, it's a big deal. So find somebody definitely who's been around, who knows how to do this.
And definitely respect organizations or associations who have people with shared interests with you. Like Labor has walked and walked and walked for some of our candidates who were pro-labor or that labor respected. A lot of race-based or faith-based organizations have worn out pairs of sneakers volunteering for a candidate they like. So if you have a field director who can tell them where to go, you will have a team of people who believe in you and love you and think that you should be their voice, who will take that data and work it through. But you do need somebody who can do this, who can work with KDP has a person who helps you cut turf. The House and Senate also do that. For your local races, in some cases, the county party will. But you need somebody who knows this enough that if they're handed something by an organization, can say, hey, we're missing XYZ data. You need somebody who's done this before. And you also need somebody who is capable of taking a leadership position, because some days that person is going to be staring at literally 50 volunteers and saying, here's where we go. And they have to be able to hand those assignments out quickly and efficiently. And they have to be able to make you walk and help you walk. This should be an active person who knows a lot of people. It should be someone from your area, hopefully. It's very hard if you hire an out-of-state person to do your field, because they can look at the maps and the data, but they don't know little things like the topography or which neighborhoods have dogs that bite. But they also don't necessarily know the things that the voter data doesn't capture. What is a really good neighborhood to walk in? What is a neighborhood that we think might turn blue, even though it hasn't been yet? And if they're from that region, they'll be much more comfortable with that. This is particularly so if you are a candidate of one race and your district is another. You don't want to be that token white person going to the black church once and saying, hi, vote for me. You want somebody who lives there and knows what the voters want, so you connect with the right people to get the right message. You want to represent the voters, and that's your goal. So you need somebody familiar with the neighborhood. Super, super organized, like Terrell said, lists are key. And it has to be somebody who can work with KDP and House and Senate and so on data maps. It can't be somebody who said, oh, I don't believe in that. I'm doing it my way. That's a person to say, thank you very much. Let's have coffee, but you're not my field director any longer. Next slide. Legal counsel. Every campaign needs a lawyer. There's going to be contracts, whether that is for a volunteer or a campaign staff person, office space, renting a car. You want somebody who can look at those super fast, free or in kind for you, and say, yes, no, sign here. I tell everybody, look around in your region and see if you have a friend or a family member who's an attorney. This is one that a family member can do for you. And if they have specific election or complex questions, they can always ask me. I work with anybody's lawyer. If you don't know any lawyers, reach out to me. Be aware that legal work isn't in kind. So we give you an invoice that says I spent, 0.2 hours on this for you, and you have to report that to KREF or FEC. It's not going to financially kill your campaign because I do it as in kind instead of you paying me dollars. But look around also and see if you have attorneys who will help you locally, because attorneys generally travel in a herd. If you have one working for you, all their friends will vote for you and work for you as well. But my email's on here if you need me. Digital director and communications comms is also something I don't do. Lawyers are not good at gently encouraging people to look at one perspective. We just tell you. So I'm not a good comms person. This person does digital communication strategies, press releases, social media, strategic planning, ad buying and planning, your website. They also, particularly in larger campaigns, are in charge of file management and online security. If you have data that is private, and sometimes your data from VAN will have some private info, this person makes sure that a hacker is not going to swoop in and steal that and start applying for credit cards. In a smaller campaign, this person may also be your communications director. And in a larger campaign, digital may not be comms. Sometimes digital is just your flyers, more of a graphic art or creative. And sometimes campaigns don't have somebody doing flyers and bulletins or even social media posts, and they're just doing Twitter and press releases. So you know your campaign best, and this need may change as you move forward. But I call them all comms. But it's anything in the communication, printing, pretty picture field. Terrell?
And of course, it depends on your race, but this can be the campaign manager as well. Just depends on the size, but if you have a bigger campaign, you definitely need a good communications person who's, sometimes I've seen news folks be involved, and where they're good at, being on TV or whatnot, they sometimes aren't as great as, working on strategy, for instance. But just depends on the race. But yeah, I mean, you can be the campaign manager in communications, but if it's a big race, you definitely need an experienced communications person. And then if it's big, the digital director is key as well to help push that message out. But just depends on the race. But these are really important to help your message being relayed all around different areas.
And we've seen some candidates do their own fairly successfully. I always think of Kate Turner and the great social media presence she had every day in her campaign when she took it over. But it's hard to do that and also be the candidate. So I really recommend, even if you're hiring it piecemeal, even if you have somebody doing your mailers and your campaign manager is doing some of it, get a college student or a high school student to do your Insta or Twitter or X or whatever you kids use today, but have them all under somebody so that there is a consistent message. You don't want your message to be 20 different unconnected things. So there needs to be somebody pulling together whoever is doing this for you. Portions and pieces of this may be something that volunteers can do or that young people can do, or that even your family can do if they want to be the ones posting the pictures of you every day. They're going to be right there with you, so they could. But it does need to be a defined role, and this is one that really can change from day to day too, depending on what goes on in the world and in your campaign. This needs to be somebody that if there is a tragedy, immediately stops everyone from sending out your fundraising emails or your strategic emails, because you don't want people staring at the TV in horror or their Facebook in horror and having your ad come through saying, hey, it's Fluffy Bunny Day, pay $5 to my campaign, because people will associate you with being socially insensitive. So your comms person, and this did sort of happen last election cycle, your comms person has to be really focused and on it and aware of what is happening in social media and the world every day. Next slide. This needs to be someone who understands your messaging, but can also tell you, man, that's a dumb idea. Let's try it this way, because they are the experts, and very few of us really understand, unless this is your field, how communications works. It's super helpful if this is a person who has a media list and media access, like Terrell talked about, but also has information on how to buy advertising. Otherwise, you'll be thinking, how on earth do I go on TV? Whereas if you have someone who's done this before, they just have on their computer a list of how you buy an ad on every radio station, television station, newspaper, how you get an editorial in the local paper. Somebody with those contacts is vital. And it needs to be someone who can keep up with daily changes and also post a lot. I have seen on social media a lot of candidates who have their candidate, Miss Anna for Kentucky type site. And it has 13 likes and they posted last week. That's not effective. You need to reach out to your county party, to KDP, to everyone you know and every organization you know and say, like my page, for goodness sakes. And you need to have fresh content on there because we are in a world where people want to see what's happening every day. And unless you're aggressively grabbing that space, mostly with fun stuff, but also with messaging, you're really losing out on something that will probably take 5 minutes a day. Next slide.
Sorry, I
Oh,
was
yes.
just going to add that if you're using social media all the time, post pictures and just have perception that you're everywhere. Show it somebody you're talking to at a coffee shop every day or somewhere in your just depends on where your district is naturally, but always show you're doing something, you're active. It'll give you some good perception that you are the hardest working candidate ever.
Yep. Fantastic point. The most effective candidates we've seen literally walk around with their cell phone selfieing. Here I am picking up my kid from school. Please don't show any children that are not yours in the ad. Here I am at the coffee shop. Here I am at church. Here I am at the ball field. And also when anything serious happens or a meeting, your local chamber of commerce or the legislature is talking about a bill that's of interest to you. People want to know that you are wearing out your sneakers for them. That really, really matters, and pictures speak louder than words. So that's brilliant, Terrell. Absolutely. Next slide. Political director. This is mostly in larger campaigns. It's somebody in charge of reaching out to different constituent groups and organizing them. If you have a state rep race or something larger than that, you're going to need labor. You're going to need various PACs to know what you're doing. Not coordinate with them if they're independent expenditure PACs, but need to know what is out there and what they are doing for you. You're going to need to have somebody who says, in this area, there are these 5 important organizations. Let's reach out and see if we can speak to them or at least invite their leaders to our events. And that is a very, very hard thing for the candidate themselves to do. That's really a role for somebody who's been around a lot. In some campaigns that are very successful, a retired legislator or a retired staff person for an elected really fills this role well because they know everybody and they can see the waves and the patterns. In some successful campaigns, I've seen this be somebody really young, like a college student who's majoring in political science and has been working on campaigns since she was 12 and has sort of that zeitgeist, that youthful understanding and feeling of this is what people are moving towards. We saw Emma Curtis do that really well in Lexington. Somebody like that is very well connected and is certainly pulling along a lot of folks behind her. Next slide. Don't staff backwards. It's very easy to say, well, first I need a political director so I can figure out what my message is and what I mean. No, you need money. First, foremost, absolutely, sadly, above everything in today's politics, you need money. And you can't hire any other position without money. So unless you are one of the lucky few candidates who are able to self-fund, and my lawyer caveat, even if you can self-fund, please don't, because politics is elusive and not predictable, and you don't want to sink a ton of your money into a race that may or may not be successful. Put in what you're comfortable with and fundraise the rest. Just because you have a lot doesn't mean you should burn it on this race. Maybe you should burn it on warm clothes for cold people in the unhoused community or something really positive and life-changing. So don't overspend on your own campaign, but you're going to have to fundraise. You're going to have to get somebody to help you fundraise. Even if you are a professional fundraiser and financial expert, you are the candidate. So you don't need to be spending time on that. Financial reporting begins immediately. You're going to put that $200 or whatever you paid as a filing fee on your first financial report. So you are now needing somebody this very minute to start keeping track of that for you. And also thinking about how to ask for money refines your plan and your message. You don't just call people up and say, yo, give me $500. You ask them to support you, to support your plan, to support your mission. And so as you're thinking about how to ask for money, you are creating the message and the soul of your campaign. So your fundraiser person helps you with that. Terrell?
Well, it helps you get people to buy into your campaign. Um, I feel like if somebody's not bought into your campaign, they're not willing to do anything for you. And if they've bought in, hey, I'm doing a fundraiser. Like, you can write your own money, but then if you don't have people buying in, you know, it's just, I don't think it's effective. It does help a little bit to be able to put in some, but the more you can get people to buy in, the more folks are going to be active with your campaign, your message, and who you are.
Yep, absolutely. And this person will also help you get over the discomfort. The first 500 times you ask for money, they tell me, is really rough. The next 5,000, much less so. And so talking about money is not always something we do well in today's society. And so this person will help you get more comfortable with that. There's a lot of advice out there that says you need, tens of thousands to win any race. I'm not sure that's true. I think we've seen candidates do super well on hardly any money if they had a great message, a great staff, and really walked through, I am not kidding, 8 pairs of sneakers. But money certainly helps. Also, when you're talking about staffing up, think about vendors. You'll need a printing shop to do your signs, your mailers, t-shirts or caps, swag, all the fun stuff. And so you'll want somebody on your team to know where to go to get those. A union bug is great. You can also print your own and just put on there, volunteers did this, but if you're running in a big race, you really do want that union bug on there to show that you support labor, because in Kentucky, since 2012, we would not have won a single Democratic seat without massive labor input, and not just the money, but more importantly, the walking, the helping, the support, the sticking signs in the ground for us. And so we in turn support labor. Orion Printing, who is in Berea and is new, it works with union suppliers and is in its last stages of getting its union bug. And so they probably are safe to work with. Reach out and talk to them if you're looking for cheap printing locally. On your bigger races where 1 million people are going to see your mailers, look at a shop that puts that union bug on there for you. You're also going to need media buys, so those will be vendors for you. You need to check pricing, because sometimes the vendors recommended by KDP or your consultant or the person who ran in your seat before are not the most competitively priced. People use what they're comfortable with, and what may have been the best vendor 10 years ago or even last year may not be the best or cheapest vendor this year. So shop around. It's a big buy. Often these are the biggest buys. The biggest expenditure you're going to have. So think about it hard, look at it, or have your finance person look at it and make sure this is a good buy for you. And you don't have to only use one. It is okay to buffet menu and shop around. This person for my mailers, this person for my yard signs, this person for my bumper stickers. It doesn't all have to be one shop. It is a good idea to have a contract with any vendors. Again, it's a huge expenditure. Let's have a way to get your money back if you don't get what you ordered. And it's also good if it's going to be a mailer slogan, anything with more than your name and yo, vote for me. You need to have an attorney look at it and make sure that what you're saying is in accordance with law and will not get you into trouble. Most of the ethics complaints we see during campaigns come from language on mailers or language on press releases. And so it's very nice to have an attorney who can run their eyes over that in 5 minutes and say, okay, you will not get in trouble for this. I think that's what I've got. Terrell, what did I miss on that one?
Well, if you're going to reach out to labor, always have that labor bug on your campaign merchandise and everything, because labor will look at every piece of campaign flyers, shirts, just anything. And if it's not, um, uniformly with a bug, you're not going to get an endorsement. I can assure you that. And try to buy American as much as you can. And if you have a cheap shirt, hat, for instance, and it has made in China, made in Vietnam, whatever, pull that out. Don't let that be in or on your shirt or anything.
That's a very, very good point. And I really encourage people, even though it sometimes costs a little more, order your shirts and things in Kentucky. I know a lot of our big political, local, and statewide organizations, if you look at their merchandise, it comes from Texas or California or abroad. Support a Kentucky vendor. What does it hurt to pay a few more dollars and support a business who's then going to say, wow, this candidate supports Kentucky small businesses. This candidate supports Kentucky workers. That's worth a lot. That gives you huge bragging rights. So yes, buy American, and when you can, buy Kentucky. All right, next slide. Notes on KDP or House Senate mailers and polls. They do a wonderful job really supporting our candidates. Typically, they won't give every campaign money, but they can give you their expertise in terms of here's a mailer or here's a poll, here's something that you could not or may not have known you wanted or could do yourself. And they split the cost among a number of candidates. It is very important, however, to remember that this is not a PAC doing an independent expenditure for you. This is an organization you can and should talk to, because at the end of it, they're going to send you a form that says, report that we in-kind donated 20 or 100,000 to your campaign. And you want that contribution to have been something that helps you. Ask to see poll questions in advance. We've had campaigns, many campaigns, where the poll questions in their regions harmed their campaign or went against their message. Make sure you as a candidate are comfortable with that poll, because you don't want them calling and saying something that's really going to make your voters angry at you. Demand to see the mailers in advance. We had a mailer go out a few years ago in a campaign for a candidate who was not white, and the mailer was inadvertently racist, and it went all over the district, everywhere. And many angry mamas in the church were calling and saying, this is outrageous. How could you have sent out this mailer? Well, the candidate had never seen it. It went out. The first time the candidate saw it was when it arrived in the mailbox. So always ask to see those and approve those in advance. And if you don't get to see them in advance, do not accept invoices from polls and mailers that you didn't approve or that hurt your campaign. You need to be very clear with everybody doing something on your behalf that you're paying for. That is not an independent expenditure. You need to take ownership of that, because they're not going to call whoever did that mailer. If they're unhappy with the mailer, they are going to call you. So you have to know what is going out under your name, under your message. Next slide.
Don't be afraid to say no to something
Yes.
like that. Stand up for yourself.
Yeah, there is no penalty for saying, no, I don't like this, please change it. Good point. Contracts, a campaign is like a startup business. That's how I tell people to think about them. This is your startup business, your very personal startup business. So act professionally, use contracts, do what you would do if you were opening a small business in your home. Have contracts for your campaign staff, have non-disclosure agreements so that your secrets and strategy and donor names and addresses don't get shared. Use volunteer agreements and waivers. When you get to the point that you're putting other people in your ads, use a waiver that lets you use that ad on TV and share that image without compensating them. Act businesslike, and that's really what all of these positions are about, is about helping you act more like a business. Oh, we're done. Terrell, what famous last words?
Well, let me remind everybody that the sample contracts that you provided, I just shared in the chat.
Wonderful.
So everybody can grab them from there.
Great. And they'll also be posted on the Democratic Auxiliary site for resources. So if you don't want to go in the chat and download them, or you're not tech savvy, you can get them the other way.
Yep.
And on my side, thank you so much for running. It's a huge honor to be a little part of your campaign. So I'm going to be a sappy mom here. You are all making the state better, and I'm extremely grateful and proud. And Tara, last words?
Have fun while you're doing this.
Mhm.
This is a good time. It can be, obviously, you're going to have a roller coaster of emotions, but ultimately have fun. I mean, you are carrying the Democratic Party's message. You are that person running. And, it's just a big deal to get your name on the ballot and just have fun and know you're going to do something good by being a candidate.
Absolutely. And we hope that you'll share with your friends and other candidates that we are doing this training series so that everyone can take advantage of whatever knowledge we impart and join us. I think we're going to be almost every Sunday for the next 3, 4, 5 Sundays. We'll be coming to you live as well as recorded to help you have an easier time with your campaign.